President Trump says only a few points of disagreement remain on a possible deal to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. But the Kremlin this morning is watering down expectations so the deal is even close. For more on these efforts, we're joined now by CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and host of Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, in our D.C. bureau. Good morning, Margaret. Great to see you. So we just spoke with a Ukrainian member of parliament a short time ago. She says she does not trust Russia. She believes Witkoff is very pro-Russian in her words, and that Russia doesn't stick to agreements. So give us the bigger picture. Where do the negotiations stand right now with the Ukrainians and Russians?
Well, what we know is that at this point, there is no active diplomacy with everyone at the same table. We have not yet heard that Russia or Vladimir Putin have accepted that term sheet, which is basically what the U.S. and Ukraine were hammering out, like what Ukraine could accept in terms of concessions. So there's no, as Russia put it, official proposal on the table. I have confirmed as of this morning that indeed next week, Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy, is planning to bring the latest proposal to Russia. That's the plan in place. So we'll see if there is any kind of concession made whatsoever by Russia. But as you've seen from attacks, even just overnight, Russia is still very much focused on pressing its advantage on the battlefield. And the Trump administration, as you heard President Trump allude to in that chat on Air Force One earlier, is assessing that Russia could really just keep going with this war and ultimately win, or at least ultimately seize the eastern part of the country. And so the U.S. is kind of operating from that assumption at this point.
And so, Margaret, from your point of view, what has either shifted or changed in the past week? We went from U.S. sources kind of saying that, hey, Zelensky could come to the U.S., maybe there's an agreement by Thanksgiving, to actually not so much.
Right. Well, look, this is head-snapping diplomacy. Yeah. I've really, truly never seen anything like this. You had Zelensky himself saying just yesterday, I'm ready to go talk to President Trump. I'm ready to travel. Plans were being made here in Washington and in Mar-a-Lago for any kind of interaction if they were set to go. And then President Trump posted on social media, not ready to meet with Zelensky yet. So that Thanksgiving deadline has disappeared. And we know that there is sort of just an invitation to keep moving these trains along on these parallel tracks. But I can't emphasize enough here how unusual it is to have the diplomats uninvolved with diplomacy. That's not who's negotiating. You have on the U.S. side the Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, very close to Vice President Vance, talking to the Ukrainians about security guarantees. He's not a diplomat. You have Steve Witkoff, who just recently started in diplomacy after being a longtime Trump friend and work in real estate, and Jared Kushner, who doesn't even work for the United States government right now, are working on the Russian end of things. So this is really unusual. So if you're confused by the back and forth, imagine what the professionals are who've trained to be doing this, because they are just very much trying to understand what is happening inside the Trump inner circle with these efforts. A lot of this exploded in the press last week in a way that surprised professional diplomats. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio seems involved in a limited way. He flew in over the weekend to Geneva and then flew out. And typically it would be the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State who would be sort of marshaling all the forces to pull in the same direction. And right now, it seems like that's not yet happening. You are seeing European officials close ranks around President Zelensky to try to help him press back and get the United States to provide more guarantees security-wise. You heard President Zelensky say overnight he wants things like access to frozen Russian funds in European bank accounts, and he wants the return of those kidnapped Ukrainian children as well.
Yeah, underscoring just how difficult this is, even with professionals, even when President Trump is using those he trusts to get a deal done. It's easier said than done. Margaret Brennan, always great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.